Hey everybody, welcome back to JB's Total Games. And well, I've been asking for feedback, and I've gotten some feedback saying people are really enjoying the pros and cons should you buy sort of format for videos. But a suggestion I got for videos that I could do is comparison videos of two similar games. Well, I thought about it, and probably the one that I want to start with are the two games that I have that are the most similar: Tammany Hall and El Grande. These games are area control games where you have a certain number of rounds where you manipulate the board, and then you basically have three scoring sections that happen throughout the game. And, similar to a lot of area control games. So while these games have a lot of similarities, they're both games that I've kept in my collection, and if you watch my videos, you might know that El Grande is actually my favorite game of all time. So you might know where I personally stand on the debate between the two, but I've kept both these games in my collection even though they're very similar. So what I'd like to try to do is show you some of the differences and similarities between the games, and maybe help you decide what you think the king of area control should be. Now, first of all, let's talk about components. Now, I do want to point out I have the 10-year anniversary edition of El Grande that I paid a pretty decent price for, so that the components are a little bit different in the new edition. The big box edition just came out. Basically, the cubes are replaced with meeples. The wooden tower is now cardboard, and the artwork is a little bit different, but still very, very similar. So, in components, we have a kind of dark brown board versus a light brown board. And basically, they're both really ugly. So we do have meeples in Tammany Hall, and we do have meeples in a new version of El Grande. There are some really nice things. These tokens are pretty neat. These are basically favor tokens you get when you gain favor within a certain nationality, but you do have to sticker all of these, and there are a lot of them, and that was a process, I'll tell you that. So it is a little bit of a negative, but they are nice after you put them together. I'm probably going to give the advantage in components to Tammany Hall, even though both games are kind of ugly to look at. I really like how the board itself basically lays out the entire turn. It lays out what the different offices do, and and we'll talk about offices, but when you get an office, you get, these nice things that are real thick, solid, and tell you exactly what they do as well. And I like games, and they also in the upper left have things that tell you what to put out in different rounds. And basically everything you need to know about the game after you've read the rulebook is on the board, which is kind of cool. Although El Grande has some nice things going for it. First of all, there's that awesome king token there. I believe it's purple in the new edition, but still really cool. And in the older editions, the massive Castillo, that solid wood, and one of my favorite components in all of gaming. So overall, neither game is very pretty to look at. Tammany Hall has some nice overall components. There is a nice bag that comes with it that my game didn't come with, and even though I contacted them, they never got back to me. It's weird how many games I've gotten that are missing components. But anyways, the Castillo is a pretty cool thing, and like I said, it's nice looking but cardboard in the new edition. So let's talk about theme. So if components maybe have a slight edge to Tammany Hall, but only slight, theme is really the category in which Tammany Hall, I feel like, wins out. However, I do want to point something out. Basically, on your turn, you're going to see if the area where the immigrants come in down in the bottom left needs refilled, and then you're either going to put out two of your ward bosses, or you're going to take one ward boss and then an immigrant and place them out onto the board, and then whichever one you place, you're going to get a favor token of that type. So this is really important because you're going to use those favor tokens for bidding and possibly for slander. So the first few rounds of the game until you get to the first election, I'm going to say honestly are pretty boring. You basically play through 4 rounds and you have an election, and then you have all that up at the top as well that displays that up in the top center there. And you're only using certain areas based on a number of players that you have unlocked, and then eventually in that whole game everything will be unlocked. Those first few rounds are kind of boring. You're just putting a guy or two out, or putting a guy and a person out and getting those favor tokens. You have an election, and there's really not a lot to it. So the game starts off pretty slow. But after that first election, someone is elected the mayor, and they get 3 points, which is a lot of points in this game, so that's pretty nice. But then they don't get any special abilities. Then the mayor must choose amongst these special abilities that they have to give out to the other players. So you get a political favor chip every turn. You can lock up a place at the start of your turn, because after the first election cycle, you have to do this at the start of your turn, use your ability. So you can't put something down and then lock up, but it is pretty powerful to be able to lock up a territory so that no one else can take it over. You can, and again, these are very thematic. You can move an immigrant to a ward, which can be important based on who can use favor tokens for bidding on things later on, or you can arrest or remove somebody, basically, so that, for example, later on, if you have situations where people are going to be using these favor tokens to bid, maybe somebody has a lot in one type and you remove the last type of that area, so then they can't use those anymore. So there's a lot of neat things. And maybe the neatest thing in the game, and I said this in my review, one of my most favorite mechanisms in a game ever are these slander tokens you can use. And basically, if you have favor with a certain group in an area, you can slander one of your opponents. So, you know, now normally you'd want to play this with 3 or more players, but I just kind of have a basic setup here. So if I was the red player, and let's say I have some favor with Italy here, and there are people here, I could slander the black player and then remove them, and then, you know, spend some of that favor to spread that rumor, because there's also, you know, Italian immigrants in an adjacent section right here, and then basically take out 2 of their guys, which can be super powerful. So basically you have to have favor in that group already, and then spend that favor to spread the rumor amongst that group. But if there was no blue cube there, I wouldn't be able to do that. And I just really think that's a neat mechanism. So the idea that you're finagling to become the mayor, that you have these cool special abilities you can use on your turn later in the games, in the second, third, and fourth rounds, and then, or ages, or whatever you want to call them, you know, that's pretty neat. Now in El Grande, you're fighting over territories in Spain, basically trying to control things, and there's a little less thematic feel to it. It feels more like a pure area control game, and this was one of the original area control games, so you know, that's kind of to be expected. There are definitely some cool things though. So while I feel like the big boost goes to Tammany Hall in its theme, I feel like the mechanisms maybe went out a little bit in El Grande. So like I said, that first age, that first selection, it feels kind of boring in Tammany Hall. Things are just getting set up to get going. Whereas in this game, you're going to have a thing where every round you're going to use one of these in order to bid on one of, you know, basically turn order, and being able to pick one of these cards that will be available. There will be a bunch of them out, one from each stack available for you, and it basically gives you a special ability on your turn. Now, the thing is, the higher number you have, the less people there are on it. So if you see the 1, there's a bunch of people on there. And basically you have a place where there's people in your provinces and in your court. And you can move people so that you have them available to place on the board. So you have places where you have a place where you just kind of have your people hanging out, and then you have a place where you can actually move your people onto the board. So the lower number bids are going to give you, you know, a later choice in where to put stuff, but it can give you more guys for availability later. So each round, from the very first round on, you're going to want to pick very carefully when you're bidding high and when you're bidding low, based on the abilities that are out and what's going on. And obviously the round before a scoring, you're going to want to be, you know, really careful about getting the right thing, because affecting the board then is a big deal. You also have the king that basically affects where you can place stuff and also locks down an area so that nothing can come in and out of that area. And there's all kinds of cards. There's cards that let you move the king, so you could, for example, change where you're going to end up putting the guys that you have the ability to put down on that turn. And then they also have a certain number on these cards of guys you can actually put out. But there are just super, super terrible cards, like this one in particular. This caused like a year-long friendly feud in my gaming group, this card, where, remember I was saying that you have your court and your provinces. Well, this one basically sends all the other players' people back from their court into their provinces, so that they're no longer available to go out on the board, and players have to get them out later. So there are a lot of mean cards that manipulate the board. I think this is probably the meanest card in the game, so that people are just going to, if they've been saving up and having a lot of people, and that's their strategy to get people out later in the game, well, they're kind of in trouble because, well, now they've lost all those people. So there can be a big fight over that card and other cards in there. There's also this cool dial that you sometimes use for special things in the game, and you also use before you score. Well, you'll score the Castillo and see, because basically on your turn you can put as many people as you want into here, and you can try to keep track of who puts stuff in there, but then you choose where they'll go before scoring happens, so that also changes how scoring happens. So I feel like start to finish, the mechanisms are smooth in both games, they're simple in both games, but I just personally feel like El Grande's just while there's cool themes in Tammany Hall, El Grande has mechanisms that I enjoy more. There's a lot of diversity in those cards. The very beginning of the game matters, and obviously later in the game and rounds before scoring matters more, but I find every round interesting because of these cards that are coming up. So what game are you going to like better? Well, I feel like if theme is a really important thing to you, I might go with Tammany Hall. Now, there's bidding in both games, and that's one of the things I want to compare. So in Tammany Hall, you have those political favor tokens, and basically, as long as you and at least one other player have ward bosses in an area, you can simultaneously blind bid however many of those favor tokens that you have matching of immigrants in that area in order to try to get more votes in the election. So you add your ward bosses and the favor tokens, and the winner gets the area. Well, that's, if you like that idea of the blind bid, if that's something you enjoy, that's also another reason to go for Tammany Hall, because you're going to have a lot of those where it's like, well, and you have to, before each election or before each one of those rounds, say how many you have that you could possibly put in. So you might have a tie and you might have 7, they might have 6. You might throw in all 7 because you really need to win that one, and they might throw in nothing, or they might throw in 6, and there's a lot of that. And if that's something you enjoy in games, then Tammany Hall is great for you. For me, I don't necessarily, even though I love Tammany Hall, I'm personally someone who doesn't really love that idea of maybe bidding a lot and then losing them and not getting anything, because if you lose, you still lose all those. It's not like you don't get them back. And although I don't mind it so much in this game as much as other games, because you do know what your opponent has, and there can definitely be some mind games as to, maybe I'm only going to throw in a couple just in case they don't throw in any, because they'll probably win, but maybe they're not going to throw in all of theirs, and all that crazy stuff. So if that's a sort of bidding that you like, then that's, something that you might enjoy. Whereas in El Grande, basically players are in order going to reveal these cards, and then you can't reveal the same card. So if it gets to you and the highest card that's been played is a 12 and you still have your 13 available, you can use it, and you can be sure you're going to get first choice and be able to do what you want, but then you don't have that 13 anymore. There are some rare things that let you take a card back, and you do kind of have to keep track of that. So it's a little bit, there's still bidding in that game, but it's a little bit more, it's not simultaneous. You're seeing what's going on, seeing what people have used, seeing what's available there. And again, I personally prefer that a little bit. Here's the deal. They're both really smooth games. They both have pretty simple gameplay once you get used to them. And, there's that build-up to the scoring rounds each time. And I think I misspoke. There's 4 elections in Tammany Hall. And, there's some really interesting things, because you definitely want to get elected mayor the last time, but getting elected mayor before that gives you points but not a special ability, which helps other players get elected in other rounds. So there's a really interesting thing there. They're both fantastic games. I remember when I first got into gaming, I thought area control sounded like a dumb concept, and some of my favorite games are area control games. And I feel like it's a matter of, like anything, what you're going to enjoy. And if you like the idea of blind bidding and those mind games of maybe losing it all, but maybe, winning a bid on just a couple because your opponent decided not to bid in, and stuff like that, and Tammany Hall is pretty neat. If themes are really important, I'd say Tammany Hall. But I really, like I said, like the mechanisms of the cards constantly. You never know what's going to come up in each round. And because of that, El Grande, you never know what round is going to be like, oh gosh, that card is going to be really powerful for that person. Do I go after that to stop them, even though it's not as powerful? For me, the whole idea of throwing stuff into the Castillo and everybody choosing where they want to put stuff. In Tammany Hall itself is worth 2 points, where every other region is worth 1. So there can be some cool fights over there. El Grande, the board has different areas worth more points based on first, second, and third. But then you can replace sections with scoring things. You can have kind of mid-round scores and stuff like that. So I feel like there's a little bit more variability in El Grande with the cards and with the way things change up as you play. So there you go. I don't think you're going wrong with either one of these games. I personally have both in my collection. So, if theme is important to you, I say Tammany Hall. And if you like that type of bidding, if you don't like that type of bidding and you like a little bit more variability, I say El Grande. So very similar, but still different enough that I personally think you should just get them both. So there's my first comparison of 2 games. Hope you enjoyed, and if you have any suggestions of what else you want to see, be sure to let me know, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Alright, bye. And lastly, as to the big debate as to which game is meaner, I personally say El Grande, and maybe that's why I like it better. Maybe I'm a terrible person.